the chairperson and distinguished members of the Governing Council of the Common Fund for Commodities, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, guten Morgen. It is my pleasure to address the Common Fund for Commodities during this 35th Governing Council. First, I'd like to recognize the chairperson of the Governing Council, Her Excellency Eniola Ajayi, Ambassador of Nigeria to the Kingdom of Netherlands. Thank you for your leadership and stewardship. I wish that I could join you physically, but I am unable to do so due to other engagements that I have right here in Berlin at the G20 Compact with Africa Conference with the German Chancellor and African heads of state. So I took time out during the meetings to write this speech and do the video recording because I believe strongly in the work of the Common Fund for Commodities and the work of the Governing Council. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, you all gather from around the world for the Governing Council of the Common Fund for Commodities today. You gather at a time that the world is facing geopolitical tensions and conflicts that are fueling global inflation and worsening food insecurity for billions of people. The Russia-Ukraine war led to soaring of prices of wheat, maize, and fertilizers. The recent ban on the export of rice by India, which could be followed, who knows, by other large rice exporters, will worsen global price volatility and calls for greater efforts to support Africa to feed itself. I say this because I know that Africa is of great interest to the Common Fund for Commodities. Nearly half of the fund member countries are African, and the continent benefits from 70% of the fund's investments. Your prioritizing Africa makes a lot of sense, and it is strategic in terms of how we will feed 2.5 billion people in the world by 2050. And that is simply because Africa accounts for 65% of all the remaining uncultivated arable land left in the world. And so, what Africa does with agriculture will determine the future of food in the world. Yet, over 250 million Africans go to bed hungry daily. These challenges are compounded by the threat of climate change and environmental degradation. Africa, ladies and gentlemen, contributes the least to the global greenhouse gas emissions, yet is the region at greatest risk when it comes to the impacts of climate change. 9 of the 10 countries that are most vulnerable to climate change are in sub-Saharan Africa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we can't let this stand. These challenges are interconnected, and addressing them requires a comprehensive strategy. Africa must adapt to survive and thrive. It has the resources and technology to achieve that. We count on the Common Fund for Commodities, impact-driven strategy to help turn this around. It is important to support the organizations such as this fund because your activities are reaching smallholder farmers and other beneficiaries across Africa's vast agricultural value chains. I'd like to, in particular, commend the creation of a new agricultural commodity transformation fund to unlock local agriculture sector potential by providing affordable finance, reducing risks facing investors, and delivering technical expertise to create equitable low-carbon supply chains. These will bring us closer to overcoming challenges in the food systems. The African Development Bank Group is also walking the talk towards agricultural transformation on the continent. The continent's food and agribusiness will be worth $1 trillion by 2030. We must therefore fully unlock these potentials and opportunities. Like the Common Fund for Commodities, one of our strategic objectives at the African Development Bank is to boost smallholder productivity, food security, and incomes. Under our Feed Africa strategy, the African Development Bank supports African countries to build resilience in the continent's food systems. Furthermore, through what we call the Bank's Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation Program, or we call it TAAT. Our investments are delivering climate-smart agricultural technologies today for millions of farmers. We also deploy innovative financial instruments to de-risk lending to agriculture and provide mechanisms to adapt to or manage climate risk. Since the launch of the Feed Africa strategy of the bank in 2016, we have invested more than $8 billion in agriculture. Over $250 million people in Africa have benefited from the bank's interventions and support. Despite these achievements, many African countries remain dependent on agriculture, extractive exports, and other commodities. Far too much of what comes from African soil is exported as raw material for processing and value addition abroad. Now just consider, for example, cocoa. More than 60% of the global cocoa supplies come from West Africa. Yet Africa processes only a fraction of that raw product into chocolates and other consumer goods. What is true for cocoa is certainly true for so many of Africa's commodities. The mission of your fund, the Common Fund for Commodities, is as relevant today as it was when it was created, to reduce commodity dependence, especially in Africa. Africa, ladies and gentlemen, cannot continue to export raw commodities, which are subject to low prices and significant volatilities. The export of raw commodities is the door to poverty, while value addition and exports of value-added products is the highway to wealth. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it is time for Africa to reap more of what we sow and other natural resources. It is time that developed countries within and outside the European Union do more to implement and support innovations that add value to commodities in Africa. Now, I believe that one of the solutions is the special agro-industrial processing zones, we call them SAPZs, being supported by the African Development Bank. These zones concentrate production, processing, storage, transport, and marketing of commodities such as cotton, cocoa, and cashew in areas of high agricultural potential. These zones target secondary cities and are designed to boost or revitalize rural areas from underdevelopment by effectively transforming these rural areas for what I will call zones of economic misery to new zones of economic prosperity. The African Development Bank has committed $853 million to develop 25 special agro-industrial processing zones in 11 countries. And this investment has further attracted $661 million in co-financing from our partners. Now, earlier this month, at the Africa Investment Forum, which we held in Morocco, the founding members of a new private sector-focused Alliance for Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zones announced $3 billion in new investment for this initiative. The alliance, made up of development finance institutions, the private sector, and development-focused technical partners from around the world, will also help to streamline the development and delivery of at least a dozen new special agro-industrial processing zones. The African Development Bank is also working with the government of Canada to set up an $85 million agri-food small and medium enterprise catalytic financing mechanism. This mechanism blends finance with innovative financial products to strengthen agricultural value chains and improve food security all across the continent. The mechanism represents the bank's first blended finance facility to target agriculture-related small and medium-sized enterprises. The mechanism also supports partial risk guarantee instruments available under the African Fertilizer Financing Mechanism, which seeks to enhance Pan-African agricultural productivity by promoting the use of fertilizers. We look forward to working with the Common Fund for Commodities for concessional financing to African farmers and small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as to de-risk lending by financial institutions to agricultural value chains. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as the Governing Council of the Common Fund for Commodities reviews this year's activities and votes on its future, I would like to urge you to be so mindful of the renewed political commitment of African leaders to not only feed Africa, but to unlock the full potential of its agricultural sector. This was clearly demonstrated at the Feed Africa Summit, which the African Development Bank organized together with the government of Senegal and the African Union in January of this year in Dakar. Attended by 34 heads of state and government, the summit developed and agreed on what we call food and agricultural delivery compacts for 41 countries. I am delighted to let you know that we have mobilized collectively $72 billion globally to help support the implementation of these compacts. Therefore, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Common Fund for Commodities resources should leverage on these food and agricultural delivery compacts to support smallholder farmers, especially women and the youth, and small and medium-sized enterprises to produce, process, and take greater advantage of trade. Together, let us turn the sweat of farmers into wealth. I wish you excellent and productive Governing Council sessions. Thank you very much.